In this video, you're gonna learn 3 essential biceps training technique tips. So by the end of this video, you're gonna have a really good understanding of where you can go right in biceps training and where you can go wrong. We'll also talk about some anatomy along the way. All right, technique tip number 1, and this is probably the most important of all 3, which is that you need to make sure that you are aligning the direction that the elbow is moving with the resistance. Now this sounds kind of weird, kind of obvious, but a lot of people miss the point of this. Let me just demonstrate this on me with a simple example. Pretend that this is a barbell and I'm holding the barbell to do curls. A lot of people will grab a barbell with this kind of grip and do curls this way. But I want you all to see what happens when I remove one of my hands from the bar. Well, when I remove one of my hands from the bar and I look at where my elbow naturally wants to move, do you all see how it's kind of moving a little bit inward to outward? Sure, I can crank my arm out this way and try to move it upward and downward. Now all of a sudden it's actually moving sort of forward to backward out in that way. Okay, so here's why this is important, because if I put my hands too wide and I'm doing curls like this, and I ask myself, well, is the elbow, my elbow actually bending in the direction that I'm loading? The answer is no. In order to do that with a bar, what I would need to do is put my hands kind of out in front of me and curl in this direction. So you all see now how my forearm and my upper arm are aligned nice and parallel with one another, and the resistance is just basically pulling my elbow apart. Whereas when the hands move all the way out here, I actually have to do a bunch of like wonky shoulder rotation stuff, because again, if I let go of the bar, my hand and my forearm and my elbow are not in line with where the resistance is pushing me. So if I did want to do a curl where my arms were wider, it wouldn't make sense to use a barbell. It would make more sense maybe to grab a single cable and angle the cable backward perfectly parallel to the direction that my forearm and elbow are moving. Let me just give you one more simple example to really hone in on this point. If I am seated and I am doing a single arm dumbbell curl, do you all see how, pretending this is the dumbbell, my forearm and my upper arm are kind of angled outward like that, inward to outward? Ideally, if I'm using a dumbbell, what I would want to do is use one side, tip over to the side because the direction of resistance is down, and then do a curl such that the dumbbell, my forearm, and my upper arm are all in a straight line. So principle number 1 is very simple but often overlooked because of its simplicity, which is make sure you're lining the resistance up with the direction that your elbow is actually moving. So if the elbow tracks inward to outward, you want a resistance that matches parallel to that. If your arms are kind of out in front of you, you want a resistance that's in front of you and parallel to that. If your arms are over here outward to the side and you're doing a curl this way, well, you want the resistance pulling directly parallel in that direction. All right, cool. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is make sure that your arm isn't moving. But there's a little bit of a catch to this, which is that you actually don't really have to do anything other than to position your arm against something correctly. For example, if Frank is doing a dumbbell curl, let's say, he shouldn't really need to concentrate on, okay, how do I keep my shoulders still? How do I keep it isolated? A lot of people focus on like, oh, depress the shoulder girdle, hold the shoulder girdle together. When in reality, Frank could simply just put something right behind his arm so that as he goes to do the curl, he doesn't have to think about any mumbo jumbo going on in the shoulder. He doesn't have to work hard to basically try to do the curl. So whenever you're doing pretty much any kind of curl, just put something back behind the arm. Now, one really key part to this is that we don't want to put the pad all the way up here on the top half of the arm. We ideally want it right below the bottom side of this bone called the humerus. This also happens to be kind of where your triceps tendon sits away from the belly, so you don't want something smushing the belly of your triceps. You want it right below there. So whether your arms are here out in front of you, here out to the side, here behind you, you ultimately want to try to get something behind the back of the upper arm for the sake of stability. It's going to make it much easier to perform these exercises without your shoulders flying all over the place. It's going to make it much easier to standardize your rep quality and your technique. And as a consequence of those things, it's probably going to be much easier for you to actually add load and progress exercises over time because you're not dealing with all different kinds of things that are unrelated to the goal of doing a curl. Now, if you don't have a support or any access to something to put behind your arm, it's not the end of the world. But what I would say is in those instances, just make sure that your shoulders aren't moving and make sure that you're not flailing your arms all over the place, turning biceps exercises into exercises that I don't know the names of. All right, technique tip number 3, and the final one, is to try to do curls in different arm positions. Why? Well, because you have 2 heads of biceps. One of the heads of the biceps runs kind of, if you can see this pink thing, inward, and it attaches to what's known as the coracoid process. And another one, by the way, that's called the short head or the inner head. And the outer head or the long head sneaks upward and kind of along the bone and attaches somewhere pretty similar on the shoulder blade. And so because these two attachment sites are not the same, they're going to lengthen and shorten differently. And without getting into too much detail here, basically what I mean is do a curl maybe where your arm is at your side or behind your body. Do a curl where your arm is maybe upward in front of your body, and then do a curl where your arm is maybe somewhere in between those 2 points, kind of not backward and behind your body, close to your body, and not forward all the way here, but maybe somewhere outward in between. So I would recommend having at least 2 to 3 different kinds of curls so that you can train the short head and long head at different lengths and in different positions to make sure your biceps training overall is holistic and complete. You know, honestly, I really wish there was a super helpful, concise guide that was science-based that could help to explain all this bicep stuff more concisely. Oh wait, there is, and I just released it. And currently it's running at 50% off. You can check the link in the description. It's my newest ebook, newest guide on how to train the biceps, the biomechanics, and it also comes with a free biceps training specific program. In this guide, you'll learn a lot more in depth about all the stuff that I just talked about, including things like how to fully stretch the short and the long head differently. So if you're interested in that, check it out. And if not, thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.